Give me one sec here as I find out where things broke and how long I was reading before I noticed that it was broken. Sorry. I don't know what happened. I'm guessing that because it's really windy outside, that a power line got nicked or something, and there was a hiccup in network transmission, and my streaming program decided to be stupid as a result. Give me a sec here. Okay, so she's talking to. Bear with me. Oh, geez, it's several pages. I think. Quite well. If I'd arranged it, how much damage? Not irreparable. No. Where's yes quite? There's yes quite. Okay. So yeah, that's like one, two, three, at least 3 pages, closer to 4 pages. So sorry about that. Also, it looks like it did not save. Yeah, I'll have to change that. Okay. It did not have the right stream description information, even though I typed it all out correctly. As you can see by this segment, having it correct, I'll have to copy paste it over, so nobody will know what that meant.
I'm not going crazy. You're going crazy. I love technology. I love it. I love to strangle it when it doesn't fucking work. Mm. Ahem.
Here we go. Those ears. Why?
She can hear a hooded dasher at a...
Oh my gosh, stop Windows! I don't need this. I'm so sorry. There we go. All right. It's just going to be one of those days. Which means it's probably going to happen on Monday too, and it's probably going to happen on Wednesday and probably next Friday. Anyway.
She can hear a hooded dasher at 100 meters. That gives us a full second's advantage. Attractive, too, don't you think? Attractive, too, don't you think?
Yes, Legata said coldly. Quite. She noticed that Lewis was still limping, but she did not sympathize with him. Although she was curious about the details of the revolt, she didn't ask. She countered by not dropping the subject. How reparable is not irreparable? Lewis dropped his cordiality and assumed his usual businesslike air.
We lost most of our clone workforce. Fewer than half of those remaining are effective. We're getting replacements from Colony and the ship, but that's slow work. 2 of the finished hangars are badly damaged. Hatches missing, holes in the walls. The clones' quarters have their exterior walls and hatches intact, but the interiors are completely useless. Serves 'em right. Let 'em sleep on the piles of plaz.
What about this building?
Took some damage back where the clones' quarters join with a storage area. They got into the kitchen, but that's where we sealed them off.
You sealed them off? Lewis glanced away from her, then back. He rubbed his nose with his finger, and she was reminded of Oakes when he was nervous. When it became obvious that he wouldn't answer, she nodded. After you discovered chlorine killed the runners, how long before you released it among the people you had sealed off?
Now, Legata, you weren't here. You didn't see what they were.
How long? He looked her in the eyes, but did not answer. So you killed them.
Runners killed them.
But you could have killed the runners.
Then the clones would have gotten inside and killed us. You weren't here. You don't know what it was like.
Yes, I think I do. Show me to Morgan's garden. It took all of her nerve just to say that word. Whatever that horror she had confronted at Colony, the name of the Garden would not be shaken off, even though she could not remember. But she saw it made Lewis uneasy to think about it, and she would be damned if she would ease anything for him. Lewis was obviously shaken by the sudden reference to the garden. It meant scream room to him, too. She could see the questions forming behind his eyes.
How much does she know? Why isn't she afraid?
She refused to allow herself the luxury of fear. Let him see that much. Until she herself remembered what had happened, she would not allow anyone else to capitalize on her experience there.
Yes, he said, his voice almost hushed. Of course. The garden. You can relax there until Morgan comes. This way.
Lewis led Legata through the finished parts of the resort and into the main dwelling, a mammoth structure carved entirely out of the mottled stone of the mountainside and lined with plasteel. She turned at the entryway and looked back over the grounds and out across the sea.
This hatchway opens to Morgan's quarters. The study, library, and cubby are all in this unit. Further back are the meeting and dining areas, all of that. I'll take you through them if you like.
She watched the pulse of waves explode against the sea-wall ahead of them, and imagined she could hear the slap and crash of the water through the insulating plaz.
Legata?
Yes. No, you don't have to guide me. I'd like to be alone.
Very well. Lewis spoke abruptly. Morgan said that you are to be comfortable. I suggest you check with me before wandering around. You may need a sentry for some of the more exposed areas. It's still early, and I'm not due back at Colony until after mid-meal. Call if you need me.
With that, the hatch hissed shut, and she was alone. Once more she looked at the sea. It tumbled away forever, drawing her consciousness outward, reaching. There's a power here that even Morgan can't buy, she thought, and fought back the temptation to run past the plazed-in trees, the flowers, and the pond, past the stream meandering through the grasses, past the protection of the compound itself, and into the wild sea air of Pandora. Then she noticed the kelp. The great masses of it which had glutted the beaches and the bay outside of the redoubt were reduced to a few isolated clumps and some long, serpentine tendrils undulating at the surface. Lewis's doing. A sudden sadness filled her eyes with tears, and she whispered aloud to the kelp, I hope they're wrong. I hope you make it. She caught a movement out of the corner of her eye and turned to see two clones working on the tower at the shuttle station. Morgan's expected in, she thought. They'll want things looking as controlled as possible. She looked closer at the two men, her attention caught by the fact that they were lifting and welding plaz that was at least 4 meters off the ground, and neither was using scaffolding. Those arms. Or rather, those arms. She wondered, coldly, where those workers fit within the clone index and price list.
Cost is no object, my dear,
Murdoch had said, and something in his inflection had terrified her. This terror was rekindled by the sight of the two workers busily welding plaz. Anything went, she thought. My every fantasy was possible. Why can't I remember? Whatever horrors or pleasures took place in the scream room were no longer a part of her consciousness. There were flashes, uncontrollable and swift, that struck her mute in mid-conversation or mid-thought. Those who worked with her attributed it to a growing absent-mindedness, an offshoot of her apparent love affair with the boss. She knew she could find the scream room hollow and see for herself what she had done. Oakes taunted her with it.
Dear Legata,
his every corpulent pore oozed honey and oil.
Sit here with me, have a nice drink, and we'll enjoy your games in the scream room.
He laughed at first when she shuddered and turned away. It was difficult for her to keep any personal control. He'd seen to that when he'd had her trapped and helpless down in Lab 1. and now the scream room had been moved to the redoubt. The laughter died away, and he had spoken to her directly and flatly. "Like it or not, you're one of us now. You can never go back. You may never walk into that room again, but you did walk into it once. Of your own free will, I might add."
Free will? Her blue eyes flashed up at him. You drugged me, and those monsters, where was their free will?
They would have no will at all, no existence at all, if it weren't for me.
If it weren't for Ship, you mean?
He sighed overdramatically. She remembered that he glanced at his view screen and made some adjustments on his console. "Sometimes I really don't understand you, Legata. One day soon you'll be luxuriating in the redoubt and its exquisite pleasures, and here you are mumbling Dark Ages crap about the mystical powers of Ship." He had shown her a holo, then, of this garden around her now. There was no question of its beauty. It was thick with vegetation and the perfumes of countless blossoms. She turned her eyes up to the dome. The immensity and wonder of the Pandoran sky pumped a strange surge of power through her. She experienced a feeling of connection, she thought. Yes, no matter what he does, somehow all of this is alive in me, just as I live in it now. At Colony, the night side before, as she had been preparing to leave for the redoubt, Oakes had escorted her into the tiny Plas dome far above his quarters. "There!" He had pointed out a large white glow slowly traversing the horizon. "There is your ship! Another pinpoint in the night. It takes no mysticism, no degree of godhood whatsoever, for one bit of mass to orbit another."
That's blasphemy, she answered, because he expected it.
"Is it? The ship can defend itself. Oh, sorry. Is it? Ship can defend itself. Nothing is out of the hearing or the reach of Ship. Ship could terminate my program at any instant, but chooses not to. Or can't. Either is the same to me. Blasphemy." He had squeezed her hand tight then. Convincing himself, she thought, and she had enjoyed the power this observation gave her. He gestured widely, indicating the entire display of stars. I have brought you to this, not Ship. Ship is a tool. Complexity to the fifth power, granted, but still a tool. Built by people, thinking people, for the use of thinking people. People who know how to take charge, how to see light in the darkening storm of confusion. As he had raved on into the night, Legata had realized that much of what he said held a surprising sense of truth. She knew that, at the bottom of whatever was happening to shipmen both on and off Ship, it was a result of non-interference by Ship itself. But she had delved into the secrets of Ship's circuitry for too long and too deeply to believe that Ship was a piece of steel and molded plastics, that Ship didn't care. She stood in the garden at the redoubt and looked up at what she guessed to be Ship's position above them. I wonder, she thought, I wonder if we're a disappointment. Two patrol drones screamed over the dome and shattered Legata's reverie. She guessed that Oakes would be coming soon. They were gearing up for him. She realized that she should prepare too. Nothing, she reminded herself, is sacred. Then, in a sudden leap of insight during the heavy stillness following the drones, she added, but something should be. This thought was liberating, exhilarating. The universe has no center. Ship quotes. Raja Thomas stood under the gigantic semi-inflated bag of the LTA in the main hangar. Lavu's crew had gone, turning off most of the lights. It was full nightside now. The bag was a dim orange bulk tugging gently at its tethers above him. There were great folds and concavities in it yet, but before Alki joined Riga dayside, they would be airborne, the bag as full and smooth as a highlighter. Except that no highlighter of that size had ever been seen. Thomas glanced across the dark hangar, impatient to leave. Why does Oakes want to meet me here? The order had been succinct and simple. Oakes was coming out especially to inspect the LTA and its attached sub before allowing them to venture into the unprotected wilderness of Pandora's Sea. Is he about to veto the project? The implications were clear. Too much colony energy went into projects such as this one. It was contra-survival. The exterminators wanted their way. This might be the last scientific investigation permitted for a long time. Too many subs lost, too many LTAs. Such energy could be applied to food production. The contrary argument of reason found fewer listeners with every passing hour of hunger. Without the knowledge we gain, there may never be dependable food production on Pandora. The kelp is sentient. It rules this planet. What did the kelp call Pandora? Home. Was that ship or my own imagination? No response. Thomas knew he was too keyed up, too full of uncertainties. Doubts. It would be so easy to share every viewpoint Oakes put forward, agree with him. Even some of Lavu's crew had been picking up that muttered catchphrase which could be heard all through Colony. I'm hungry now. Where was Oakes? Keeping me waiting to teach me my place. The self-constructed persona of Raja Thomas dominated this thought, but there were distant echoes of Flattery in it. That's with a capital F, his former last name. Distant, but distinct. He felt like an actor well seated in his part after many performances. The Flattery self lay in his past like a childhood memory. What have you hidden in the depths of the sea, ship? That is for you to discover. There, that definitely was Ship talking to him. The LTA creaked against its tethers. Thomas stepped from beneath it and peered up at the sphincter's leaves of the sky door. Oh, sorry, sphincter, that's not a possessive. Thomas stepped from beneath it and peered up at the sphincter leaves of the sky door, a vast shadowy circle in the dim light. His nostrils tasted a faint bitterness of Pandoran esters in the air. Colony had found that some volatile renderings from select demons insulated the area around them against other ravening native predators, especially against nerve runners. Nothing was forever, though. The demons soon developed counter-responses. Thomas looked back at the shadowed sub, a smooth black rock held in the tentacles of an artificial highlighter, a smooth black rock with glittering lines down its sides. Again, the LTA creaked against its tethers. There was a draft in the hangar, and he hoped this did not mean some unguarded opening to Pandora's dangerous exterior. He was unarmed and alone here, except for perimeter guards at the ground-level hatches, and a watchman off somewhere brewing tea. Thomas could smell it faintly, a familiar thing, but marked by the subtle differences of Pandoran chemistry. Am I being set up to go the way Rachel Demarest went? He was a doubting man, but there was no doubt in his mind about the way of Rachel's passing. It had been too convenient, the timing too good. Who could question it, though? Such things happened every day on perimeter patrol. Colony had a number for this attrition. 1 in 70. It was like losses in a war. Soldiers knew, except that most shipmen appeared to know very little about war in the historic sense. They knew soldiering, though. He sniffed. A faintly sweet undertone of native lubricants drifted on the air. This made him acutely aware of how grudgingly this planet gave up any of its substance to Colony. He had seen the reports. Just cutting in the wells for those lubricants had cost them 1 life for every 6 die-urns. And there was a general reluctance to go for cloned replacements, an unexplainable reluctance. Fewer and fewer clones around, except out at that mysterious project on Dragon. What was Lewis doing out there? Why the growing split between clones and naturals? Was it something about being groundside? We originated on a planet. Was there some atavistic memory at work there? Why don't you answer me, ship? When you need to know, you will know without asking. Typical ship answer. What did Oakes mean by new clones? Are you helping him on that project, ship? Are these new clones your project? Who helped you make me, devil? Thomas felt his throat go dry. There had been barbs in that response. He glanced at the sub suspended off to his left. Quite suddenly, he saw it as representing a fragile and foolish venture. Sub and LTA had been shaped to simulate a highlighter carrying its characteristic rock ballast. No matter that the sub did not look much like a rock. I should be out preaching ship's demand instead of risking my ancient flesh on this venture. But Ship had given him no stature for this game, no platform upon which to stand. How will you worship? No matter the different ways Ship phrased the question, it came out the same. Who would listen to an unknown, self-proclaimed CP awakened from Hybe? He was an admitted clone, member of a minority whose role was being redefined by Oakes. Talk to the sentient vegetable. Did the kelp have an answer? Ship hinted at it, but refused to say definitely. That's for you to discover, devil. No help there. No clues on how he could open a conversation with this alien sentience. In the abstract, it was an exciting idea. Talk to a life form so different from humankind that few evolutionary parallels could be drawn. What strange things could we learn from them? What could the kelp learn from him? Again, Thomas glanced at his chrono. This delay was getting ridiculous. Why do I permit it? By this time, Wheeler will have our poet in her cubby. A deep sigh shook him. Processing had released Panille less than an hour before nightside. They delayed him deliberately, the way Oakes is delaying now. What did they have in mind? Wheeler, if... Could that be the cause of Oakes' delay? Had Oakes discovered that Wheeler... Thomas shook his head sharply. Foolish speculation. He felt cold and exposed waiting here in the hangar, and there was no denying his uneasiness at thoughts of Wheeler. Wheeler and the poet. Thomas felt torn by his own imagination. He had never before experienced such a powerful physical attraction toward a woman. And there was in his background, dredged up from that ancient conditioning process, a terrifying drive toward possession, private and exclusive possession. He knew this ran directly counter to much of the behavior Ship had allowed, or promoted. Wheeler. Wheeler. He had to force a mask of distant, deliberate coolness. The delay with Panille could have been the time for preparing him to act against me. They could have been briefing him. It was necessary that Wheeler become intimate with this poet, peel away his masks, and find... What? Panille. Pandora. More of Ship's doing? Wheeler would find out. She had her orders. She must turn this Panille inside out, peer at the center of his being. She would learn and report back to her commander. Me. Who obeyed Oakes that way? Lewis, certainly. And Murdoch. And that Legata. What a surprise to find she was the Hamill of Ship's briefing. Did they set traps the way he had set this one for Panille? Wheeler would do it right. It must seem a fortuitous accident to Panille. The right time. the right conditions.
Damn it! How can I be jealous? I set this up!
He knew he was performing according to Ship's design, and probably according to Oak's design. What was the relationship between Oak's and Ship? Blasphemous man, Oak's, but Ship allowed the blasphemy. And Oak's might be right. Thomas had come to suspect more and more that Ship might not be God.
What did we make when we created Ship?
Thomas knew his own hand in that creation, but had there been other unseen hands in that construction? Who helped you make me, devil? Who helped you make me, devil?
God or Satan? What did we make?
At this moment it did not much matter. He was tired in body and emotions, and his dominant personal hope was that Panille would see through the sexual trap and defy it. Thomas did not really expect that to happen.
I'm doing your job to the best of my ability, Ship.
A function of my devil is to frustrate good works. Shipmen must extend themselves beyond anything they believe possible. Those had been Ship's words to him.
Why? Because frustration helped us to succeed with Project Consciousness?
Were they only replaying an old theme which had worked once and might work once more? It occurred to him then that the moon-base director who had supervised the building and the crew preparations for that original void ship, old Morgan Hempstead, had served this identical function.
He was our devil, and we knew it. But now I'm Ship's devil. And best friend.
Thomas found cynical delight in this thought. Being a friend of Ship carried special perils. Oakes might have chosen the better role, enemy of Ship. Thomas knew his own role, though. Ship chided him with it often enough. Play the game, devil. Yes, he had to play the game even though he lost. A scraping noise intruded on his awareness. The sound came from the locker area where the sub-crews prepared for their flights. Dead men's lockers, the colony called them. Something moved in the shadows over there, a waddling figure clad in a white shipsuit. Thomas recognized Oakes. Alone. So, it was going to be that kind of meeting. Thomas took a handlight from his pocket and waved it to show where he stood. Responding to the light, Oakes changed his path slightly. Oakes always felt diminished by the hangar area. Too much space used for too little return.
Bad investment.
Thomas appeared dwarfed by the immensity of the semi-inflated bag overhead. These thoughts firmed his resolve. It would not pay to cancel this project outright without a dramatic motive. There were still some who supported it. Oakes knew the arguments.
Learn to live with the kelp.
You did not live with a wild cobra. You killed it. Yes, Thomas had to go, but dramatically, very dramatically. Two CPs could not coexist in colony. Oakes did not want to know what Lewis and Murdoch had arranged. An accident with the submersible, perhaps. There already had been enough accidents without arrangement. The cost in shipmen lives had reached abrasive levels. Colonists expected casualties while they subdued this planet, but the latest attrition rate went beyond the tolerable. As he came up to Thomas, Oakes smiled openly. It was a gesture he could afford.
Well, let's look at this new submersible,
Oakes said. He allowed himself to be guided to the sub's side hatch and into the cramped command gondola at the core, noting that Thomas offered no small talk, none of the unconscious obeisance of language which Oakes had come to expect from those around him. Everything was business, technical. Here were the new sonar instruments, the remote recording sensors, the nephelometers.
Nephelometers?
Oakes had to cast back into his medical training for the association.
Ah, yes, instruments for collecting and examining small particles suspended in the water.
Oakes almost laughed. It was not small particles which needed study, but the giant kelp, fully visible and completely and certainly vulnerable. In spite of his amusement, Oakes managed a few seemingly responsive questions.
What makes you say that everything in the sea has to serve the kelp?
Because that's what we find. That's the condition of the sea. Everything from the grazing cycles of the biota to the distribution of trace materials, everything fits the growth demands of the kelp. We must find out why.
Grazing cycles of...
The biota, all the living matter, the mud-dwelling creatures and those on the surface, all appear to be in a profound symbiotic relationship with the kelp. The grazers, for example, stir the toxic products cast off by the kelp into a layer of highly absorbent sediment, where other creatures restore these substances to the food chain. They...
You mean the kelp shits and this is processed by animals on the bottom?
That would be one way of stating it, but the total implication of the sea system is disturbing. There are leaf grazers, for instance, whose only function is to keep the kelp's leaves clean. The few predators all have large fins, much larger than you'd expect for their size, and
What does that have to do with...
they stir the water around the kelp.
Huh?
For a moment, Oakes had found his interest aroused, but Thomas had all the earmarks of a specialist blowing his own private horn, even to the esoteric language of the specialty. This was supposed to be a communications expert? Just to keep things moving, Oakes asked the expected question.
What disturbing implications?
The kelp is influencing the sea far more than simple evolutionary processes can explain. Perhaps it supports the marine community. The only historical comparisons we can make lead us to believe that a sentient force is at work here.
Sentient?
Oakes put as much disdain as he could. Oakes put as much disdain as he could muster into the word. That damned report on kelp highlighter relationships. Lewis was supposed to have made it inaccessible. Was the ship interfering?
A conscious design, Thomas said.
Or an extremely long-lived adaptation and evolution?
Thomas shook his head. There was another possibility, but he did not care to discuss it with Oakes. What if Ship had created this planet precisely the way they found it? Why would Ship do such a thing? Oakes had absorbed enough from this encounter. He had made the gesture. Everyone would see that he was concerned. His guards were waiting back there at the hatch. They would talk. Losses were too high, and the CP had to look into it himself. Time to end it. Oakes relaxed visibly. How nicely things were going. And Thomas thought, he's going to let us go without a struggle. All right, Ship, I'm going to pry into one of your secret places. If you made this planet to teach us your warship, there have to be clues in the sea.
Well, I'll want a complete report when you return, Oakes said. Some of your data might help us begin a useful aquaculture project.
He left then, muttering loud enough to be heard.
Sentient kelp.
As he walked back across the hangar, Oakes thought it had been one of his best performances, and all of it caught by the sensors, all of it recorded and stored. When whatever Lewis had arranged happened, they would be able to edit excerpts from the record.
See how concerned I was?
From the sub's hatch, Thomas watched Oakes leave, then slipped back down for a final inspection of the core. Had Oakes sabotaged something? All appeared normal. His gaze fell on the central command seat, then on the secondary position to the left where Wheeler would sit. He caressed the back of the seat. I'm an old fool. What would I do? Waste precious time with a useless dalliance? And what if she refused to respond to me? What then, old fool? Old? Who but Ship even suspected how old? Original material. A clone, a doppelganger, but original material. Nothing like it alive and moving anywhere else in the universe. So Ship said. Don't you believe me, devil? The thought was a static burst in Thomas's awareness. He spoke as he often did to answer Ship when alone. No matter that some thought him slightly mad.
Does it matter whether I believe you?
It matters to me.
Then that's an edge I have and you don't.
You regret your decision to play this game?
I keep my word.
And you gave me your word. Thomas knew it did not matter whether he said this aloud or merely thought it, but he found himself unable to prevent the outburst.
Did I give my word to Satan or to God?
Who can settle that question to your satisfaction?
Maybe you're Satan and I'm God.
That is very close, my doubting Thomas.
Close to what?
Only you can tell. As usual, nothing was settled in such an exchange except the re-establishment of the master-servant relationship. Thomas slipped into the command seat, sighed. Presently he began going through the instrument checklist, more to distract himself than for any other reason. Oakes had not come to sabotage, but to make a show of some kind. Devil. So Ship was not through with him.
Yes, Ship.
There is something you need to know. Thomas felt his heartbeat quicken. Ship seldom volunteered information. It must be something momentous.
What is it?
You recall Hallie Eckel?
That name was familiar. Yes, he had seen it in the Panille dossier which Waela had supplied. Panille's medtech friend, yes? What about her?
I have exposed her to a segment of a dominant human past.
A replay? But you said...
A segment, Devil, not a replay. You must learn the distinction. When there is a lesson someone needs, you do not have to show the entire record. You can show only a marked passage, a segment.
Am I living in a marked passage right now?
This is an original play, a true sequel.
Tink, tink, tink.
That's the sound of the fourth wall getting chunks chinked out of it.
Why tell me this? What are you doing?
Because you were trained as a chaplain. As a chaplain, it is important that you know what Hallie has experienced. I have shown her the Jesus incident. Thomas felt his mouth go dry. He was a moment recovering. Then,
the Hill of Skulls? Why?
Her life has been too tame. She must learn how far holy violence can extend. You, too, need this reminder. Thomas thought about a sheltered young woman from the shipside life being exposed suddenly to the crucifixion. It angered him, and he let that anger appear in his voice.
You're interfering, aren't you?
This is my universe too, Devil. Never forget that.
Why did you do that?
Prelude to other data. Panille has recognized the trap you set for him and avoided it. Waela failed. Thomas knew he could not conceal his elation and did not try, but a question remained.
Is Panille your pawn?
Are you my pawn?
Thomas felt a tight band across his chest. Nothing worked the way he expected.
Presently he found his voice.
How did he recognize the trap?
By being open to his peril.
What does that mean?
You are not open, as my devil should be.
And you told me you wouldn't interfere with the roll of the dice.
I never said I would not interfere. I said that there would be no outside interference. Thomas thought about that while he fought to overcome a deep sense of frustration. It was too much, and he spoke his feelings.
You're in the game. You can do anything you want, and you don't call that...
You, too, can do anything you want. This froze him. What powers had Ship imparted to him? He did not feel powerful. He felt helpless before Ship's omnipresence. And this business of Hallie Eckel and the Jesus incident, what did it mean? Once more Ship intruded. "Devil, I tell you that some things take their own course only if you fail to detect that course. Waela really feels a powerful attraction toward young Panille." Young Panille? Thomas spoke past an emptiness in his breast.
Why do you torture me?
You torture yourself.
So you say.
When will you awaken? There was no mistaking Ship's frustrated emphasis. Thomas found that he did not fear this. He was much too tired, and there was no more reason for him to stay here in the sub. Oakes had approved the venture. They would go out on schedule, Waela and Panille with him.
Ship, I'll awaken early tomorrow and take out this LTA and its sub.
Would that this were true.
You intend to stop me?
Thomas found himself oddly delighted at the prospect of Ship interfering in this particular way. Stop you? No. The play must run its course, apparently. Was that sadness in Ship's projection? Thomas could not be certain. He sat back. There was a stabbing ache between his shoulder blades. He closed his eyes, sent his fatigue and frustrations out in thought.
Ship, I know I can't hide anything from you, and you know why I'm going out to the sea tomorrow.
Yes, I know even what you hide from yourself.
Are you my psychiatrist now?
Which of us usurps the function of the other? That has always been the question. Thomas opened his eyes.
I have to do it.
That is the origin of the illusion men call kismet.
I'm too tired to play word games.
Thomas slipped out of the command seat and stood up. He kept one hand on the seat back, spoke as much to himself as to Ship.
We could all die tomorrow, Waela, Panille, and I.
I must warn you that truisms represent the most boring of all human indulgences. Thomas felt Ship's intrusive presence withdraw, but he knew that nothing had been taken away. Wherever he went, whatever he did, Ship was there. He found his thoughts winging back to that faraway time when he had been trained, conditioned, really, not merely as a psychiatrist, but as a chaplain psychiatrist. Fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Old Matthew knew how to put the fear of God in you. Thomas found it took him several blinks to overcome a sense of panic so deep that it kept him locked in place.
Early training is the most powerful, he reminded himself.
Man also knows not his time, as the fishes that are taken in an evil net, and as the birds that are caught in the same, so are the sons of men snared in an evil time, when it falls suddenly upon them. Christian Book of the Dead, Ship Records. For a long time after returning to Ship from the Hill of Skulls, Hallie could not find the will to leave the room. She stared up and around at the softly illuminated space, this secret place where Kerro had spent so many hours communing with Ship. She remembered the borrowed flesh of the old woman, the painful and halting steps, the ache of aging shoulders, the feeling of profound sensitivity to her familiar body pervaded her awareness. Each tiny movement became electric with immediacy. She remembered the man who had been nailed to the rigid crosspiece on the hill. Barbaric! Yeshua. She whispered it. Yeshua. It was understandable how this name had evolved into that of Jesus, and even to the Jesus of Jesus Lewis. But nowhere could she find understanding of why she had been taken to witness that agonizing scene. Nowhere. And she found it odd that she had never encountered historical records of that faraway event, not in ship's teachings nor in the memories of shipmen who came from Earth. In the first moments of her return, she had asked Ship why she had been shown that brutal incident, and had received an enigmatic response. Because there are things from the human past that no creature should forget. But why me? Why now? The rest was silence. She assumed that the answers were her own to find. She stared at the comm console. The seat there at the instruction terminal was her seat now. She knew it. Kerro was gone. Groundside. Ship had introduced her to this place, had given it to her. The message was clear. No more Kerro Panille here. A shuddering wave of loss shot through her, and she shook tears from her eyes. This was no place to stay now. She stood, took up her pry box, and slipped out the way she had entered. Why me? She wound her way out of softwares and into D passage leading back to medical, into the workings of Ship's body. The beep of her pry box startled her. Echo here, she said, surprised at the youthfulness of her own voice, not at all like the ancient quavering of that old woman's voice she had borrowed. Her pry box crackled. Then,
Echo, report to Dr. Ferry's office.
She found a servo, and, instead of walking, rode to medical.
Ferry, she thought. Could it mean reassignment? Could I be joining Kerro groundside?
The thought excited her, but the idea of groundside duty remained fearful. So many nasty rumors. And lately, all groundside assignments seemed permanent. Except for the tight-knit political circle at medical, no one made the return trip. Pressures of work had kept her from thinking much about this before, but suddenly it became vital.
What are they doing with all our people?
The drain on equipment and food from Ship was a topic of constant anxious conversation. Recurrent dayside orders exhorted greater production efforts, but few speculated about missing people.
We've been conditioned not to face the finality of absolute endings. Is that why Ship showed me Yeshua?
The thought stood there in her awareness, riding on the hum of the servo carrying her toward medical and ferry. It was clear to her that Yeshua had ended, but his influence had not ended. Pandora was a place of endings. It gulped food and people and equipment. What influences were about to be sent reverberating from that place? Endings. The servo fell silent, stopped. She looked up to see Medical's servo gate and She looked up to see Medical's servo gate and, across the passage, the hatch to Ferry's offices. She did not want to go through that hatch. Her body still throbbed with sensitivities ignited by what Ship had shown her. She did not want Ferry touching her body. It was more than her dislike for him, the silly old fool. He drank too much of the alcohol which came up from Colony, and he always reached out to put a hand on her somewhere. Everyone knew the Demarest woman brought him his wine from groundside. He always had plenty of it after her visits.
His food jets can't support that kind of drinking.
She stared at the dogged hatch across the way. Something was definitely wrong, shipside and groundside. Why did Rachel Demarest bring wine up to Ferry?
If she brings him wine, what does she get in return?
Love? Why not? Even neurotics like Ferry and Demarest needed love. Or, if not love, at least an occasional couch partner. A remembered image of foul breath shuddered through her mind. She could almost feel the touch of his hand translated to her own young flesh. Involuntarily, she brushed her arm.
Maybe that's how they get so foul. No love, no lovers.
There was no evading the summons, though. She slid off the servo and crossed to Ferry's hatch. It snicked open at her approach. Why was she reminded of a sword leaving its scabbard?
Ah, dear Hallie.
Ferry opened his palms to her as she entered. She nodded. Dr. Ferry?
Sit down wherever you like.
His hand rested on the arm of a couch, inviting her to the place beside him. She chose a seat facing him, cleared off the mess of papers and computer disks that covered it. The whole office smelled sour in spite of ship's air filtration. Ferry appeared to be drunk, at least happy.
Hallie,
He said, and recrossed his legs so one foot reached out to touch hers.
you're being reassigned.
Again she nodded. Groundside?
You're going to the Natali.
Ferry said. It was totally unexpected, and she blinked at him stupidly. To the Natali? The elite corps, which handled all natural births, had never been her ambition, not even her hope. A dream, yes, but she was not the type to hope for the impossible.
How do you feel about that?
Ferry asked, moving her foot with his.
The Natali, working daily with the sacrament of worship.
She nodded to herself as the reality of it seeped through her. She would join the elite who opened the hatchway to the mystery of life. She would help rear the children shipside until they were assigned to their own schools and quarters at the age of 7 annos. Ferry smiled a red-stained smile.
You look stunned. Don't you believe me?
She spoke slowly. I believe you. I suspect that this, she waved a hand at his office, was for reassignment, but... Ferry made no move to respond, so she went on. I thought I'd be going groundside. Everyone seems to be going there lately. He steepled his fingers and rested his chin on them.
You're not happy with this assignment?
Oh, I'm very happy with it. It's just... She put a hand to her throat. I never thought I mean, why me?
Because you deserve it, my dear. He chuckled. And there's talk of moving the Natali groundside. You may get the best of both worlds.
Groundside? She shook her head. Too many shocks were coming at her one after the other.
Yes, groundside.
He spoke as though explaining something simple to an errant child. But the foremost provision of worship is that we give our children to Ship until they're 7. Ship designated the Natali as trustees of birth, and their quarters are here, the estate.
Not Ship.
Ferry's interruption was guttural.
Some CP did it. This is a matter for our determination.
But doesn't Ship...
There's no record of Ship doing this. Now, our CP has ruled that it is no violation of warship to move the Natali groundside.
How long until...
Perhaps a Pandoran anno. You know, quarters, supplies, politics.
He waved it all off. When do I go to the Natali?
Next diurn. Take a break. Get your things moved over. Talk to...
He picked up a note from the jumble on his desk, squinted.
Usija. She'll take care of you from there.
His foot brushed the back of her heel, then rubbed her instep. Thank you, Doctor. She pulled her foot back.
I don't feel your gratitude.
But I do thank you, especially for the time off. I have some notes to catch up on. He held up an empty glass.
We could have a drink to celebrate.
She shook her head, but before she could say no, he leaned forward, grinning.
We'll be neighbors soon, Hallie. We should celebrate that.
What do you mean?
Groundside.
He pushed the glass toward her.
After the Natali go.
But who'll be left here?
Production facilities, mostly.
Ship?
A factory?
She felt her face blaze red.
Why not? What other use will we have a ship when we're groundside?
She jumped to her feet.
You would lobotomize your own mother!
Whirling from his startled gaze, she fled. All the way back to her quarters, she heard the drum of Yeshua's voice in her ears. If they do these things in a green tree, what will they do in a dry? And that will do it for this week. Sorry about the technical problem and interruption in the midstream. I will get the stream description and title copied over for that one after this is done. So yeah, hopefully people enjoyed despite those technical issues. So next week we will be doing on Monday, provided no emergencies crop up, we'll be reading more of Man-Fac by Martin Caden. Wednesday, we'll be reading through more of Bear v. Shark, the novel by Chris Batchelder. And then next Friday, we'll do more of The Jesus Incident by Bill Ransom and Frank Herbert. Hopefully people enjoyed. I think I'm repeating myself again and again and again and again and again. I spend my days just mooning. And so on. Right. If you are tuning in after the fact, listening to this as a recording via probably the YouTubes, and you're wondering
why exactly it is that it's so rough and uncut and, generally kind of shitty, unprofessional.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's because I do them live, unfiltered, unedited, and uncut. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting at, 12 noonish U.S. East Coast time. So whatever that is, Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daily Time, depending on whenever, which I realize is not a convenient time for literally anyone, but there you have it. Except for me. Obviously, it works well for me, and anyone who listens to it during lunch or on their car ride, subway ride into work, that sort of thing. Or if you're on the flip side of the world, it's, midnight to 1 o'clock in the morning for you, in which case, get some sleep. At any rate, again, hope people enjoyed. Yes, it sounds plaintive. He's trying to convince himself he's doing something other than screaming into the void, which he knows full well that's what he's doing, which is why I don't push people to like or subscribe or anything, because I never did this with the misapprehension that it would be a money-making scheme. I did it because I have a sizable library of books that are cool, and hopefully I could read them aloud to people and they might enjoy them using the internet as a vessel. It's just more noise and static added to an already corrupted signal, but hey, as we wait for the end times, why not enjoy ourselves, have a fun hobby? Yeah, so with that, I'm going to scooch. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. See you all next time. Toodaloo!